Hello and welcome back to Spare Room Studio. My name is Jackie. Today I have a video for you which will demonstrate how I have coloured the background in this particular page here. The book is Pop Manga Catitude by Camilla Derrico, and I had already coloured the figures, and then I thought that I would bring you along to show you how I was going to use gel crayons in the background to create a very loose impressionistic background. I do apologise in advance. There are some areas where I have been able to edit out some coughing and throat clearing and so on, so you might see some short bits of footage where there's no sound. I've tried to mute that, and some areas I may miss being able to edit some of that out, so I do apologise in advance, and I hope that you enjoy seeing how I go about colouring this background. I had absolutely no idea how it was going to turn out, so I take you along with me for that journey. So I've been colouring this page using Caran d'Ache Neo Colour 2, and I've got to this stage, which is pretty good. I've added a teeny tiny bit of pencil in there, really not very much worth talking about, but I'm not happy with the way the background is looking. So that's the feet down there. So just bring you down. I've got you in quite tight for the zoom at the moment, just so that you can see what I'm doing a bit more carefully or clearly. So I'm going to finish the background by adding some gel crayons. Now I've got an old case that some alcohol markers came in, and this is my collection of gel crayon Bible highlighters. And along with the Bible highlighters, I've also got some poster paint sticks. Now these do not work anything like gel crayons, so I haven't been using those very much, but I've got a cheap set of sort of pastel-y colours, and then I've got two sets of Bible highlighters that were very pale vintage colours, which have been very handy. And then also I bought the 48 set of Shuttle Art gel crayons. So I've got quite a range of colours to choose from now, you know, plenty to be going on with at this particular point in time. So I'm going to try and make this a little bit, not abstract, but a little bit indistinct, maybe? I don't know. So anyway, let's see what happens. Let's just get started. So I'm going to just put some colours in different places. Now the background has a very, very pale repeating pattern of dragonflies on there, and I was sort of trying to feature them without making them a really strong focus, I guess. And it wasn't working, so what I think I'll do is I'll just pretend that they're not there, and if they show through at the end of it, it's not going to matter, but I'm not going to make a feature of those dragonflies in the background. So I'm going to put some darker colours . And then I have to sort of mix between those Bible highlighters and what I've got in the Shuttle Art set, because no one set necessarily has all the colours that I want. So that is why it is handy having these, you know, different paler colours to mix in with the bolder, brighter colours of the Shuttle Art, because the Shuttle Art colours are quite bold. There's not a lot of really pale colours, and you might be able to see as I'm working with those crayons with each other, they're blending on the paper somewhat on their own. You can, you know, work with them and blend them in with each other on the paper. So just keep it pretty random. At this stage I'm going to stick to mostly greens, but I like the little bits of purple to tie her in with what's happening in the background, and also to, you know, potentially suggest that there's something other than greenery in the background. It doesn't have to be all green. So what I might do there is, where I've got that purple anyway, let's put a bit of, that's very pale. As you can see, the Bible highlighters are meant to be pale because you're supposed to be able to highlight text and be able to read text through them, so that's why they are purposely translucent. So if you haven't used these before, I've got a couple of videos on the channel now that show how I use them, and sometimes I have it really chunky like that. So if you're interested in seeing how I use them, there are those videos, so you can watch me build up a whole page, but this is just a random sort of background. And I'm giving some thought to it, but not a lot of thought. So what I'm trying to do is put the strongest, deepest complementary colours next to each other so they make each other pop a little bit more. So having that dark purple next to the yellow hair hopefully is going to help that stand out. If I put the purple behind her purple jacket, it's not going to have a lot of impact. If I was to put, you know, like the bright greens or an orange perhaps in the background by her purple jacket, then that's going to really make each other pop, because that's what complementary colours do. So now, instead of just using my fingers, I'm going to use a cotton bud to blend it in, and here's where I might fall down because I'm putting purple over green, and quite a yellow green as well, yellow based green. So I could create mud very easily. But I thought that I might record what I'm doing, because even if this fails, it'll give you an idea of what the process of playing looks like. And as a rule, I would not suggest you wait until you've got a page nearly fully finished before you start experimenting. But I've done this often enough that I hope that I know enough that it's going to come off, and if it doesn't, well, it doesn't, you know, it's just one of those things. But if you're going to try anything experimental, I certainly wouldn't recommend that you wait until you've got a page that's, you know, 90% complete, that you're happy with, and then you suddenly go gung-ho experimenting and trying something that's completely new to you when you're that far along, because if it doesn't work, you're going to be very disappointed. And at this point in time, it's not that I necessarily know that I'm not going to fail. This could potentially go very, very wrong. But I'm also of the thinking that I'm not so invested in this page that if it does go wrong, I'm going to be heartbroken. I've got pages that I wouldn't like that to happen on, and I don't really want it to happen on any page. But I'm not so invested in this one, you know, that it's not worth having a go and seeing what will happen. Nothing ventured, nothing gained sort of thing. Right, so that's not really working that well. So I am going to use my finger, and I apologise, my hands are a bit banged up at the moment. So If my hands look a bit yucky, I do apologise for that, but I was hoping to not get it in the video too obviously. So smaller areas, still the cotton bud is perfect for getting up into tight edges and areas. So combination of little circles, smudging it into little circles, blending and smudging in that circular motion. You can also rub with your finger . Okay, so I'm going to need more gel crayon on there. I haven't got enough on there. So let's go back and put a little bit more product on here. And I'm liking the way that this dark green is looking. So let's put a little bit more. So it will end up looking a bit like an out of focus random background, hopefully. You know, when if you look at a photograph that is very focused on the subject, the background or the foreground is sometimes very out of focus, and that's the concept that I'm going for here, rather than having a recognisable items in the background. And it's not about having a smoothly blended background either. It's about being very loose and impressionistic. And what I might need to do at the end is, once this has had a chance to dry, because the gel crayon has that greasy sort of sticky feeling when it's first applied, if I let it dry and then come back to it when it's not sticky, I can add a bit of pencil in and tidy up around the actual figures as well. So just to show you, you do get really mucky, but sometimes the best result is from using your finger. Sometimes other things just don't cut it. You see how that will get lost a little bit in there because he's got green pants. So if we bring in a bit of purple, and if you're watching, Chris, this is where you need enough product to get that really sort of greasy, vibrant, deep colour. You need to have enough product on the page or it just won't work. Make sure I don't get colour where I don't want it. And you can smudge and you can smear and get different types of mark making and stuff going on. Okay, let's see if we can get in a bit closer with the cotton bud. So I'm just using off camera, I'm using a wet wipe to get that off, and you'll see that it's cleaning off very easy with a bit of a damp wipe. So just even an old cloth that's damp will do the same thing. But I find these wet wipes very handy to have close to hand. Just smearing it around. I'm not being too particular about the blending, but I am being careful about getting up to the edges of the image without going over the edge of the image too much, although you can tidy it up with a little bit of pencil at a later stage. So just be careful. Sometimes the blending of too many colours, you know, on that one cotton bud will end up making mud. And here I'm just going to put a bit of variation in areas for a bit of interest. So doing those little circles, and see if we can get that away from there maybe. Let's get a clean. And I might be able to lift some of that off with water as well. But just sort of doing some random swirls to blend. There is no real formula to this, it's just try things and see whether you like it. If you don't like it, re-blend it over or add some more product, and you can hide or disguise some of those things that you don't like. But you know, it's not set in stone yet. Before it dries, you can manipulate the gel crayon quite a bit. Bit of cotton from the cotton bud there, so you can still, you know, like keep manipulating it and move it. And if your finger's a little bit damp, so I've got a pot of water over to the side, so if I just wet my finger a little bit and it's damp, now that's sort of smearing it, and it almost gives it that sort of painterly look. Again, that will work best if you've got lots of product. If you haven't got a heavy enough, you know, lay down of gel crayon, then this is not necessarily going to work. So it's very much try it and see. And that's why I suggest, if you're going to do this for the first time, you don't do it on a page that you love. So if you don't like something, soften it off. You know, it's a bit like finger painting. You can play around with smushing it around and so on. And then you can also wet your cotton bud a little bit. And it's almost like using a paintbrush. You can use a paintbrush, of course. But if you don't have one to hand and you do have a cotton bud to hand, then experiment a little bit by wetting the cotton bud. I'm not sure how I'm going to fix this bit up down the bottom here just yet either. Haven't thought that far ahead. I just knew I was going to get these crayons out, and I thought you guys might like to just come along and watch. You might see a masterpiece or you might see a big mess. Let's pick some of that excess colour up from there and use it over here. So I think I need a bit more purple here to carry on. I've actually gone over the tail there. So sometimes it's not a case of getting it right first time, you know, you have to play a little bit. And you have to learn and adapt as you go along and fix things up on the fly. It doesn't necessarily mean you're failing. It's actually a learning opportunity. So I think I'd like a bit of lighter colour in there. Again, I'm getting a little bit too dark. That green, dark green is really starting to take over a little bit too much. So let's go back for a nice bright green. So a little bit of bright green. So do you get the feeling, I hope? I know it's through the camera, but this is starting to really build up a lot of product and really sort of get a very substantial feeling about it. I'd like a really nice bright green. That was a lime, that was actually a Caran d'Ache Neo colour too, so I might have to stick some of that on there and see, will that work? This one's a yellowish green, but it's nowhere near as bright as the one that I'm meaning. So, about this one, oh, that's the same sort of colour. Let's have a go with the Neo colour too. I might have to wait until it dries and come back. Remember, you don't have to do the same sort of strokes all over the whole page. So just because I was doing circles there doesn't mean that I have to do circles everywhere. You can do some cross hatching and different sorts of mark making. And then I'll just clean that off. I Might have to wait for it to work for that, wait for that to dry before that will work just as I want it to. What might actually work is a little bit of yellow. Yep. Now what I'm doing here is a twisting motion, and I'm leaving lots and lots of product on there. You may see that it's quite chunky, and I'm just going to pat at it. My finger is still a little bit damp from the wet wipe. And I might have to leave this dry overnight and come back to it now, because I've got that really chunky, and I think then at the end I'm going to have to use some satin glazing liquid maybe to seal it. So I'm just going to stand up now, and I'm looking at it from a bit of a distance. And I feel like we're lacking a little bit of the pink now. And they're reminding me a bit of flowers, so I'll get a nice pink and do a few and it might look like they're standing in front of a hedge that's got flower, like wildflowers growing through it or something maybe. You know, that sort of real impressionistic. Maybe not that red. Okay, so I'm just pressing that into the paper. Now what I'm going to do is I'll probably need to leave this to dry at least overnight. It is the afternoon on Sunday now. And I will have to come back at another stage and show you how that dried and how I might finish it off. I think that red was not right. So I might actually change that by adding a little bit of like that. And again, you don't want to have the same thing mirrored all over the, you know, repeated all over the page, because nature doesn't happen in symmetry like that. It's usually a little bit sort of less structured. So if you want it to look like a nature background, you don't want a regular repeating pattern that's, you know, the same everywhere. So have a look how those strokes are up close. Really, really rough and random. I might leave that, as I say, it's going to have to dry, so I'll leave that and I'll come back to you with some more footage once we've let that dry overnight. Sorry, the more experimental I get with something like this, the more it becomes difficult to talk about what I'm doing and describe what you're doing, because I'm actually thinking here about, you know, I'm assessing it. I'm looking at it and thinking, okay, am I happy with all of that, or do I need to put another colour in? You know, what's going on with it? I want to lighten that up there, but maybe not too much white as such, but just lighten it up. Now, I had none of this planned when I started. This is nothing like what I thought it might be. I just thought I would put random colours on there and still have those repeating pattern dragonflies coming through, and now we can see none of it. I've completely covered it. So going with the flow, allowing it to unfold and tell you basically, you know, what needs to happen, rather than you having it all planned out in your head. This is the sort of thing that can happen. So I'm just adding a little bit more of this purple, trying to get the sort of colour balance right. So at this point in time, it's taking on a life of its own, and it's starting to remind me of a Monet impressionistic painting in the background, and I kind of like it. I'm happy with that. So I will say goodbye for now in this little section of film and see what happens when it dries. So I'm back to this page now, and it has been outside for a few hours in a warm place, but not excessive heat on it, and I left it overnight to dry out completely. So I'm going to show you a bit more close up again how chunky and textural and raised. Hopefully you can see some of that. It's really hard to show it. And I am now going to look at finishing this particular page off, and I'm going to use some Prismacolor pencils with it to do that, and also some more Neocolor 2s if I need to. So just bear with me while I get comfortable, and hopefully I'm going to stay in frame and focused for you. So I'm just going to put a scrap piece of paper down here so I don't mark that other adjoining page too much with my pencil case, and I'm going to choose some colours that will blend in with what I've got here, hopefully. I thought I might also use the Neocolor 2s again, just to build up some of the extra colour over the top of the dry gel crayons. And I think I may need to gosh words, I may need to seal this with satin glazing liquid so that these little bits, you know, stay where they are and they don't keep falling off like that will. Okay, so there are a few bits that I noticed I missed So I'm going to use a combination of things, and I'm going to make sure that I vary all the strokes as well, because I don't want to start making everything look far too tidy and blended. I'm really enjoying the looseness of that background and the liveliness and spontaneity that's there without, you know, actually having to look like something. And I'm kind of liking that a lot. You know, this sort of thing doesn't always strike me as being a good thing. It depends on my mood. And not every picture is going to want to be treated the same way or need to be treated the same way. But it certainly is nice to mix things up every now and again. So that's, I've missed there a little bit, so I need to blend that in. I find that I come across a technique or a colour or you know, something that really grabs my attention and I really like it, and before I know it, I am using that same method or creating that same look on just about everything, and then I merrily go on my way for quite a while, and something will jolt me out of that, and I realise that I'm doing the same thing on everything. Everything's starting to look the same, regardless of the artist or the book or whatever. And I realise that it's time to start experimenting and mixing things up a little bit. And it doesn't mean that you have to do that all the time, and it also doesn't mean that you have to change permanently, but it's just nice to mix things up a little bit every now and again, you know, jumpstart that whole creative process again, and before I know it, I'm suddenly, you know, creating new things and having a new sense of enjoyment about what I'm doing. I'm not quite sure I like what's going on up there just yet, so that might require a little bit of jiggery pokery to get that, you know, to blend in how I want it to. And don't forget your Neo Colour 2s, you don't have to activate them with water if you don't want to. You can use them in a number of ways. I am sorry about my voice. It's quite frustrating that it doesn't seem to be improving overly much at the moment, so it's very, very frustrating. So here I'm just going to even this up a little bit. I don't want to make it perfect because I want to maybe imply that, you know, that it's bushes and a regular sort of background that they're standing in front of. And you see how you can use the Prismacolor over the top of this gel crayon once it's dry. And what I'm going to do is just tidy up some of these edges where I've gone over the edges and it doesn't make sense. So I'm not saying that you need to tidy it up for the sake of tidying it up, but when you've lost the definition or being able to read what's going on with something, it doesn't make a lot of sense anymore, then you do need to go and tidy it up. And it's not about being, you know, perfect or perfecting something. It's just really making it easier to understand and see the edges clearly and make out the shapes of things as they're meant to be, rather than very, you know, indistinct, blurred edges that might potentially be confusing. So there are bits coming off of there. Small amounts of gel crayon are coming off on the pencil, which I'm just, you know, wiping off at the moment. I've also got a wet wipe here to keep cleaning my hands with. One thing I've noticed with the wet wipes, using them to keep cleaning off my hands, it does dry my skin out quite a bit. So if you have issues, you know, with skin related issues, maybe keep that in mind if you're going to start using things like wipes or cleaners on your hand. That purple in there is a little bit messy, so I might use the violet here. So you can see I'm not putting in, you know, huge amounts of detail, but I'm just tidying up those edges so that Camilla's drawing comes back into focus. And I don't want it to be precise, so I'm just going to do some hatching and match the intensity of the mark making that is in the background with the gel crayon, so that it's not really obvious, that you can tell that some bits, you know, are pencil and some bits are the gel crayon. I'll just get that out of the way. And where's that green again? So this is peacock green and violet that I'm using here in the Prismacolor. And then I still want there to be a bit of a shadow on the ground under their feet and under the feet of the cat, so that they look like they're grounded. So I'm looking for, this is a 90% cool grey. I'm just going to deepen some of that up so that they look like they're actually sitting and grounded and not floating in the air. And you can see the dragonfly pattern down the bottom here, so I might need to think about deepening this colour up somehow so that I can cover that up, because given that we can't see it there now, it looks a bit crazy the way that that's sitting. And I just feel like it's a bit indistinct there behind the tail. And that might require us to put some white back into there where I went over their tail with the green. And just a little bit along the edge there, just to help show you where the edge of that tail is. And any little bits of distracting white where I wasn't able to get up to the edge of the figure with the gel crayon. So this is still the 90% cool grey. And again, I don't like to have, you know, a colour come up to the edge of that arm and then be completely different on this side. I feel like it needs a bit of continuity from one side of the arm to the other so that it doesn't look totally disjointed. And what I'm doing is, like, my eyes are travelling around this composition constantly now, looking for areas that are you know, standing out to me, and I'll obviously disrupting the flow of what's going on. And that's not working over the very thick gel crayon. That still feels a little bit greasy. Right, so now we've got a lot of darks in there. We need to balance up some lighter areas. You know, give the eye somewhere to rest. That's a little bit lighter as well. And I think that these little cats need a little bit of help to be a little bit more strong in colour. And because they're drawn in such a whimsical way, I didn't see a need to make these cats look like they're real cats. So the colour choices are not particularly meant to be lifelike. And I'm also not going to try and render fur and make anything look like it's you know, a real thing. I do apologise for the throat clearing and the coughing. Try to edit it out when I catch it in the editing, but sometimes I do forget and miss bits. So I do apologise if that happens. So I might do something down here in maybe a warm grey. And I also want a lighter one, so this is 50% French grey. And maybe this is 20% French grey, just to help blend all of that together. I'm pressing a lot harder now. So when I'm doing stuff like this, I try not to go in even lines or anything, but stagger it in a bit of a zigzag type of fashion so that the colour doesn't end up looking like it's in stripes. And looks a bit more like a natural sort of undulation of ground. Or maybe, you know, some gravel or something, but just so that it doesn't look like it's in stripes. And then where's that violet? We'll bring back a little bit more deeper violet in the shadows. So don't forget, if you're unsure about anything that you're doing, work in light layers, and it's always easier to get darker and darker than having to try and erase something that's not what you'd hoped for. So the nice greasy sort of smushy consistency of a Prismacolor is helping to match that gel crayon background somewhat. So this lighter colour is acting as a bit of a blender to help blend some of that texture out and to blend the colours together. Don't want it too textured. I just need to get right down to this very edge here. Now I do like to, sorry if I bump your camera then, I do like to stand back and keep viewing it from a distance to see whether the intensity of the colours looks right and I've got them in the right places and so on. Just go back to a darker grey again for a moment. Get that little bit of variety going, because you know I know I harp on about it quite a bit, but having a variety of intensity of colour and line work and all the variety that comes with that helps to just make it a little bit more of an interesting picture than a solid block of finely blended colour. Okay, and the only thing that's sort of sticking out to me is that there's still a little bit of areas in the purple background there that look a little bit sort of flat. So this is violet in the Neo colour too, so I'll just use that to add a little bit of variety in here and there, help those purples to sort of blend in a little bit more. And it's always a balance, you know, of keep adding your tones and your colours in to keep the the right balance of the colours. I'm trying to think of a better way to describe that, but I can't really. So I think that's getting pretty much to where I want it to be. Now the cat's whiskers, I don't know when I put purple on there, but I'm not exactly liking how that's looking. And the last thing really is to tidy up her face. Think about, do I want there to be any sort of colour on that little cat design on her hood there? And I'm just trying to be mindful that I don't smear everything too much. So I need a little bit of colour on her lips here. Let's have a think. What's this, mulberry? And I need to just do something with her eyes. They look a little bit lost, so maybe just darken up the pupil. And I need a little bit of a soft pink. For that, for her cheeks there. I'm at risk of overworking that somewhat, so I need to be careful here that I don't do too much. This is just a battery operated eraser that I don't always use the battery. I just sometimes erase with that point. I think I've just gone a little bit too dark there. Let's take that back off and rethink that. Maybe a softer. Softer pink. So the tendency with these sorts of images are to start making them look like a real face, and they're not. They're, you know, pop manga is the name of the book. It's actually not meant to be like a real human being face. So sometimes I have to remind myself of that, you know, she's not a real flesh and blood girl. But that nose is really troubling me for some reason. But anyway, that will have to do. Now, her little socks here have got dragonflies on them. And I think that I'd like to put a bit of colour on them. Maybe a soft green. I've got sap green light here. And just a little hint of green. is going to be enough there for those. And that little face on there, I'm thinking maybe let's do like have we got like a peachy colour? And leave the outline on there. A little bit of peach in that cat there. And I think that that's probably pretty much done. I will just do some satin glazing liquid in case you want to see me do that. And the good thing about the satin glazing liquid is that you can come back and put a bit of coloured pencil over the top of that satin glazing. I'm going to use a plastic palette, give it a shake. I'm using golden satin glazing liquid, and I tend to just put a little bit in the palette or onto a plastic lid, you know, some sort of disposable lid or something like that, and I just take a little bit out at a time because I don't want to waste the product. And then I won't disturb the gel crayon too much. Actually, what I'll do is just make sure that I've got all bases covered, that I'm not getting it onto any other pages. And because the gel crayon is water soluble, you don't want to agitate the surface too much because you can actually pick up some of that. And of course the Neo Colour 2 is water soluble too. So I just go gently with this first application, and I'm quite slapdash with it. I'm not worried if there's any texture to this once it's dry, because it's all lumpy and bumpy. It's not going to matter if there's any texture, you know, lines in the paper once that has actually dried. And then I'll put a little bit more on. And I usually try to come back the other way. And that just makes sure that I get every bit of that crayon sealed on there. And this is just the way that I do it. I'm not very professional. There are probably people who do it much better than me and much tidier than me. But my goal is to just make sure that this, so just got to be careful because some of that gel crayon is actually moving and transferring, so I'll just make sure that I don't disturb that surface too much. So my main goal is just to make sure that that gel crayon stays where it is, that it doesn't transfer onto this page too much, you know, and doesn't create too much of a problem when I'm closing the book. Now, we are just in the early stages of summer here where I live. It is starting to get a little bit warmer, and it's also quite dry at the moment. There's no real humidity hanging around here where I live, so this will dry reasonably quickly. I'll probably leave it open on my table overnight to let it dry out thoroughly. If there's anything real obvious that I don't think I'm going to like the look of, then I'll smooth that out. But yeah, the goal is just to make sure that all this nice, lovely, lumpy texture is completely sealed and not going to move. And then rinse that out in water straight away. I do go and wash my brushes with a bit of gentle detergent. They're only synthetic, very cheap brushes, so just a gentle detergent I find is enough to clean them and make sure that I can keep using them into the future. And yeah, that's pretty much all I would do with that. I'm just making sure you can see all of that. This is starting to look a little bit indistinct here. We'll see what it looks like once it's dry. If I need to put any details back into his hair, I can do that once it's dry. But yeah, I'm really happy with that one. The background's quite unexpected. I really didn't think that it would work that well, so I'm quite pleasantly surprised by that. It's a day or two later now, and I thought I'd show you how this page has ended up drying. I'm still not 100% sure whether I like what's going on there, but I don't know that I care enough to do any more about it. I'll see. I can always add things as I go along at a later stage. I did want to share with you that the satin glazing liquid, I feel like on the gel crayon especially, that it does sometimes take a little bit of the shine and intensity away from the crayon and make it look a little bit dull. But it's still, you know, well within, you know, what I would enjoy looking at. So I'm happy to keep using it. I also wanted to share with you that some of these very chunky areas of gel crayon that was very thick, very textural, is still moving a little bit. So if I press really hard on there, I'm getting a little bit of colour off of that still. So my options will probably be to either let it dry out a bit further and put another layer of satin glazing liquid on there, or use something like this. This is paper that I think it's sold for sandwich wrap and, you know, for food safe. So it's got a slightly waxy, shiny finish on one side and more dull on the other. And I'm thinking that if I keep something like that in there when I keep the book closed, it's going to stop any of that colour transferring over to that page. So that's probably how I'm most likely to approach it. Or maybe, you know, I will put that satin glazing liquid on again. I don't know, because I've already moved on to other pages that I'm colouring now. So I hope you've enjoyed seeing the process that I went through. I thought it was maybe going to be helpful for you to see that you don't have to always have a very structured plan in place when you're going to use something like gel crayons or oil pastels or something like that. That you can build up that background or an image in layers, and you can keep reworking it and moving things around until you hit upon something that you like. And also to maybe share with you that you can create something like this that's quite loose or impressionistic. I wouldn't say it's abstract, it's more impressionistic, I suppose, and just let it unfold, let it do its own thing, and just keep assessing and going, you know, with that, and working with it as you go along. So I would just say again that I think that things like this are best to practice on a page that you're not particularly invested in. So for example, in this book, you know, these big pages like this, where there's not a lot happening behind it, these are the sorts of perfect images and pages to play around with materials, and this one might be similar, to play around with different types of art supplies and mediums, and just let yourself explore and see what can happen. It's not something to do when you've already got your page almost finished and then you wonder what you're going to do with the background, and then potentially could you know, have a result that you're not too happy with. It can be very disappointing. But anyway, let me know what you think. Is it something that you're going to have a go with yourself? Are you going to let yourself play and explore your art supplies in a different way perhaps? I hope you've enjoyed it anyway. I am really happy with it. As I say, it's nothing like I expected, but I think it suits the image, and I'm already on to the next one. So take care everyone, and happy colouring. See you in the next video. Bye now.